My name's Adam Roderick. Really glad to see you here. There are a lot of papers on your chairs that talk about building a sales engine. It's not my session, but I will try to wing it as best I can. So let's get ready to build a sales engine. Really glad you're here. Akira, thanks for bringing name tags. Jesse, no problem. Michael, I'll try to remember Michael. We have an hour together. I can talk for an hour. I would much rather talk about what you care about. So if I'm glossing over something and you'd like to dig in, stop me. If you have a particular question about your situation, I'd love to talk about it, right? We can do this textbook style and I'll just talk, or we can make this a lot more interactive, which I hope we can do. So thanks for coming. Before we jump into it, there are some thank you slides to our sponsors. So thank you for joining us. This is the 11th annual Denver Startup Week. How many veterans do we have here? Multi-year Denver Startup Week attendees. Great. First-timers, more than half. All right. Glad you're here. Thank you. I've attended 4 or 5 years, not all in a row, and I've gotten a lot out of it. It's really helped me. This is my first time giving a session, so I'm excited to give a little bit instead of just receive. So thank you again for coming to this session. We have title sponsors Amazon, Capital One Cafe, Dell for Startups, and Downtown Denver Partnership. This session is part of the growth track, sponsored by Slalom. So they have a table at the back. They're a great company, and they have a great presence here in Denver. And I don't know her name, but she's fantastic. She's manning that booth. And make sure you follow the code of conduct. And if you would like to use social media to promote me or Denver Startup Week, much appreciated. So the hashtags are Den Startup Week or AnalyticsOS would be the hashtag. And if you do tweet it, you might be the first person in the world to tweet that hashtag because we just branded it AnalyticsOS. Lots of sponsors, which make all this possible. They rent the space, they provide everything. Any sponsors here today? Oh, okay. They don't come to sessions, but they do sponsor everything. So like I said, my name's Adam Roderick. The goal today is I want to give you a way to demystify your data. Data is not always easy. Analytics is not always easy, but I would say is necessary. Still hear me okay? No? Stand over here. I'll stand over here because this is a really friendly group. Over here, they were really nice to me. Am I back on? Okay. Maybe David will work on it. He had another microphone, so. AV, which is harder, AV or data? First poll, is data harder than AV? Data. Data, 2 votes for data. I'm going AV now too. Okay, is this better? All right. If it gets bad in the back, you'll let me know, right? Okay. Still. Test. Yeah. All right, well, let's do it all in 2 minutes, and then next time it won't work. So I run a company called Data Tier. Ben is here in the audience. Ben also works with Data Tier. He's actually the brainchild behind all of this. He does all of this all day with our teams and our customers. So my goal is to give you a framework. There's a lot behind this, so I want to make it as simple as I can. So my goal today is that you can walk out with a feeling and knowledge that this is possible, and there's a mental model you can follow and a process that you can follow. Even if you don't have all the details, we can come back around together and get details. But that there's a process you can follow to actually be successful with analytics in your company for any business, even if you're not a data expert, all right? There are a lot of people who feel like you have to grow up as an engineer to be able to use data. Of the impact and the majority of the issues that we see is not a technical problem. It's just how do you get organized? How do you follow all this? How do you do all this? So we branded our process Analytics Operating System, and that's what I want to give you with, an operating system to kind of run your analytics without turning it into a full-time job, without having to become an engineer all on your own. And I don't have a clicker, so I'm going to have to keep coming back to this laptop. If you stay to the end, I will give you a discount code of 100% off for any of the templates that I'm showing you today. right? So if you like the templates, you want to try them out, you can certainly go buy them, and that would be supporting this effort. That would be fantastic, but no need. You'll get a discount code. And I will do that. Yeah, I'm about to switch over, so thank you for that. So let's jump here. Yeah, they gave me the big screen today. This is really nice. So these words are tiny. You don't have to work. Well, there's not a lot of words to read. We're kind of a guide. So apologies for the small screen and the small text. I didn't know that would be the case. So if you do want me to read something off of the screen, just raise your hand. Say, what does that say? I'll read it. And then I'll share this out with you after I want to have the content. Am I still going in and out? Okay. So, like I said, the goal is for you to be successful with analytics in your business, to break things down from this ambiguous, difficult, big concept into steps that you can follow, pretty clear and specific and simple to follow. If you follow them, in the same way that data tier does, and we've seen a lot of success. So first, I want to make sure that we actually agree on these principles about this analytics operating system, because there are a lot of ways to approach data, and there are a lot of ways to approach analytics. And if you've ever seen a large data project in the past, you've been part of a company that had analytics in place, it used to be a big legacy project to actually get anything done. Huge amount of hardware, you had the amounts of teams that had to come in, and sometimes it was a year or more before you ever saw anything come out of that. I don't think that's the case anymore. There's a lot of new technology and new capabilities, but there's also changes in process. So these principles on the left: be lean, be iterative, be pragmatic. We're not trying to boil the ocean. We're not trying to solve this in the same way that a big company would solve this. This is ideal for companies that are getting it for themselves or that have struggled in the past. This principle, make business impact, should drive everything. Again, with technology, it's easy to get lost in the technology. And with the technical tools, it's easy to get lost in the technical tools. So everything that we do, and you'll see this in some of the templates and the steps, should be driven by, are we making business impact? Are we, whatever we're doing, whether it's a technical task, are we actually impacting the business with data? If we're exploring the data and we're getting lost in all kinds of things, how do we bring it back to, let's make business impact? Let's answer the questions we need to answer, use data to make decisions that we need to make. Data is a journey. I always talk about, this is a crawl, walk, run process. And we see the magic of machine learning, and we see the magic of like robots dancing and jumping, all based on real-time data calculations. And sometimes we get caught up in, man, if I could capture that in my business, we could pull all this data together and do this data science, we could work miracles, we could work magic. But that is not the right place to start. And we're all in this journey in our businesses, and it's a crawl, walk, run. So get the basics right, then move on, do something more complicated. So that's a core principle to this framework. And then people first. Again, with technology, super easy to get lost in the data. Ethically, easy to get lost in, oh, we could do this with the data, we could do that with the data. I talked with somebody who's in a marketing agency. I lost her. Who's in a marketing agency. There's a lot of personal information out there that you can pull together on your own, that you can buy from third parties. What are you going to do with that data? So, and then also, this is business, these are projects, we're trying to make business impact, but really we're just trying to solve people's needs. And so that's another core principle of this. Like, we're not trying to build a framework for a framework's sake. We're not trying to do data for data's sake. We're trying to pay attention to what does the business need, what do stakeholders need, and we get there for people. Any thoughts on these principles? Do you agree with these principles? Do you have other thoughts? I'd love to hear if there's any other thoughts. Am I missing something here? Oh, great question. What's your name? Pam. So Pam says, can you elaborate a little on people first? She's a little suspicious of this. She says, it's just a data set, right? Like, how is this people first? Did I get your question, right? So people first is one of data tier's core principles. And what I found when you're working in technology and when you're getting in the weeds, it's easy to lose sight of people, and it's easy to get caught up in tasks and configuration and technology. same token, when you're working in business and you're focused on financial results and more sales and achievement, it's easy to lose sight of people. So anything that I do in my career, I don't want to lose sight of people. I don't want to get lost in the technical weeds so much that I don't care about people anymore. Get lost in business results so much that I don't care about people anymore. So I just didn't want to lose that element. That's it. It's as simple as that. Just a reminder. Yeah. So hold me to it. If you see something, you go, Adam, that is not people first, and you told us it was going to be. Hold me to it. Any other thoughts? In your experiences with data, are there principles you've tried to follow? Yes. Hi. We almost were introduced earlier. Nice to meet you. I know. Yes, here we are. So expand on be iterative. So this comes from, I have a software background, so building software projects, and there's a principle that's pretty widely used. Stop trying to build the perfect system at first, and stop trying to solve for everything that you might need to solve for at first, and do a slice, and then do the next slice and the next slice. And if you do that, then you could actually deliver some value to your business with that slice. Even though it's not the whole vision you might have for it, if you can deliver that slice, you get value a lot earlier out of what you're doing, but you also start to inform yourself because the rubber hits the road. You can get some real feedback from either customers or internal stakeholders, whereas maybe your vision was wait 6 months, 12 months to say, hey, here's the thing. They might go, really what I was after here. Slice, and on that slice, get that feedback loop, deliver a better product, whatever that product is. Product, that kind of thing. Did that help? Yeah. Be iterative? Great. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thanks. So this is text you probably can't see. There are 4 pillars here: product, process, people, and platform. And so as you think about creating an analytics program in your company, most of what you should do falls under one of these 4 pillars. And in each of these, I've tried to break it down. Here's how we do it. And here's some templates maybe you could follow and things to remember as you're doing it. Oh, so people first. See, Pam, I did people first. It says people. So getting your people right is the first step, and you can make a bunch of mistakes as long as you have the right people and the right framework for them to work in, right? They have trust that they can do things, those kinds of things. I'm not going to make this a leadership or an HR presentation because I'm not good at that stuff, but I have seen that with the right clarity for them, that you can recover from a lot of things that you may not be able to recover from. So the first thing I want to talk about is just what are the skills you need in data. So I know I talked to a few of you before the session. There are some very technical people in this room, and there are some people that are completely technical, right? So recognize we have that mix of audience. As you have tried to work on data in your organizations, what are some skills that have been useful to you? Or skills that you wish you had? Setting benchmarks? Interesting. Okay, so everything's comparative and relative. Hey, we had a 10% increase. Is that good or bad? All right, so like an understanding of benchmarking and how to do that. Great, thank you, Pam. What have you seen? Tell me some stories from your data adventures so far.
I think one thing I've seen, like I'm the founder, and there's certain things that like I grasp from my experience with all the different systems we use, but people who are much more skilled in actual data, like they don't have all that knowledge, so trying to like tease for all these edge cases that I know exist, but like that's been a challenge.
Awesome. What's your name? Brandon. So Brandon says he's a founder. He's got a complete view of his business, or a broad understanding of his business. People that are assigned to work on data don't have that, and they're missing that. So missing that, you're missing the skills, the technical skills they have. They're missing the broad view that you have of the business. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Brandon. Thank you. So, yes, sir.
The ability to visualize the data so it provides actionable intelligence.
Great. The ability to visualize so it provides actionable intelligence. Now, Are you talking about just visualization or figuring out what it should even be showing you?
Starts with figuring out what are the questions you're trying to answer.
Figuring out what the questions are you're trying to answer. That's my opinion too. What questions are the decisions you're trying to answer? Then even on top of that, how do we visually represent that information, right? To even two different skills in there. Great, thank you for that. So as you're getting started, there are two core skills. This says analytics engineer and data analyst. So these skills, when I talk about data analyst, this is not an engineer. This is somebody that maybe they're a superstar with Excel, but that's their technical ability, is to be able to really manipulate the data in Excel. They're not trying to program something, but what they do understand is how to analyze the business and how to suss out those questions that need to be answered, and how to understand, well, here's the data we have available, and here are the questions we need to answer. What can we do with it? What questions could we answer? That's the skill of an analyst. It's critical as one of these core skills, because if you just focus on the technical skills, like Brandon said, that team or you're going to be missing that broad picture. So even though you're able to bring the data in, what are you going to do with it? Do you really understand the business? Can you analyze and get to the questions that you need answered? But the other core skill is an analytics engineer. And this is somebody that understands how to get data out of wherever it is, bring it together, how to manage it and make sure it doesn't decay, for lack of a better word. But that's your technical person. And it's a specialization in technology. Forgot your name, remind me, Will. So Will is a software engineer, and he works for a company that has data tools. But that's a very different skill. A software engineer and a data engineer. So finding a person that has some experience in data, not just in technology, is an important role to start with. If you can get those two skills in place, you can go a long way with building out analytics. When you talk about data engineer or machine learning or data science, sometimes people get thinking they need to bring in like a high-priced data scientist. That's not a crawl stage. So if you're in the crawl stage, don't get caught up in that. These are very basic. They're not always cheap skills, but they're very basic skills. Move the understand the business. Any questions on role? You want to dig in any there? Yes. How do you set your team up for success when you need all these skills, but you have very minimal members? Great. Are you asking how do you pick which skills to bring in first, or how do you tell your team what to work on first? Okay, I would bring in analytics engineer and data analyst and just start there. And those don't have to be full-time positions. You may have somebody in your company, or it might be you, that understands the business and the data well enough, not the technical aspect of the data, just the data that you have available. Like, hey, we have a CRM. I know that it has contact records. If we could combine that with our billing system and the invoicing, wow, we could really answer some great questions. That's the role of a data analyst, and it doesn't have to be a full-time person. But you do need that engineer that can say, I know how to get data out of the CRM, and I know how to get data out of the billing system and put it together. So I would start with those two skills. Did that help, Claire? Okay, great. I'll talk a little bit about this, but just from talking to folks, I don't know if this is of too much interest for the folks in the room, so stop me if I go over it too fast. But as you think about how do you organize your data team, there's this one concept of centralized or embedded. So if you have a centralized data team, it's a team. They are a manager, they have a thing. If you have an embedded approach in your organization, then you have people in the departments like finance, and the benefit of that is they can move a lot faster because they understand that department intimately, and they understand the questions around finance, and they build a domain specialization while they're building their analyst or specialization. So you can move a lot quicker because they understand the domain a little bit better. But what you lose out on is that centralization. So if you're centralized, then your data can be a lot cleaner. It can all be in one place. Everybody knows where to go. And this is not an either or. This is kind of a spectrum. You can have a core data team with some folks embedded if you want to embed an analyst out in the team. So this is, if you've worked in technology, this is new concept. It's just applied to data team. How much centralization do you try to have and the benefits there versus embedding? I'll keep going unless somebody says, hey, yeah, this is really interesting, this centralized. But I don't think anybody's in a real sizable company to dig into that. Okay, so this one is important. Data as a product or data as a service. So data as a product means you are going to provide data sets. You're going to provide the data out. Now, you're probably going to be cleaning it, combining it. Like in the example we used with Claire, maybe your central team is pulling data from your CRM and pulling data from your finance and billing system all into one place, but then you're kind of just giving the data back out. Here's good, clean data that represents our business. Go do what you need to do to answer your own questions about it. Versus data as a service is more of the team is going to provide answers. So this is more of a, we're going to try to get this data team to embed themselves more in the business. And it is a service. It's a team that is customer oriented, right? Stakeholder oriented. So they're still doing a lot of the same tasks, but in this world, it's more, you're receiving requests. Hey, I need this report, or I have this question that we need to answer, or are we in compliance? Like these kind of questions are actually coming into the team. At data tier, we typically do data as a service. So I'll talk a little more about when you might do product, but go ahead.
So based on the previous slide, would you say that data as a service is more aligned to that centralized team where there's a group who's providing insights and who's handling all the data questions and answers versus the embedded that's a little bit more self-serving analytics within each department business unit?
Great, it was Mike, right?
Yeah.
So Mike was asking, hey, if you're centralized, if you want to do data as a service, do you need a centralized team? How do those two slides relate? I think this matrix you need, Mike, of like where you want that to fall. Now, I do think, especially in like a SMB kind of company, a centralized team with a data as a service approach is like a great place to start. And I think there is some truth to what you said of like, hey, if you're doing data as a service, but you're completely embedded, completely decentralized, is that really, could you manage that? I don't know, probably not. So there may be some pieces of this matrix that you couldn't actually pull off. Yeah. So the suggestion here is just as you think about your organization, do you want data as a product or data as a service? Do you want that? Which mode do you want to operate in? And do you want a centralized data team, or do you want to try to embed and get some more domain expertise out into the departments? And then my suggestion is, as simple as this is, pick a spot on this matrix and communicate that. If somebody comes into a department from another company and they're used to data as a product, they might not even know they can engage your data team and make requests to them, and vice versa. So just be clear when you're communicating this, how our data team is going to operate in our company. It's going to fall right here on this matrix. Or if you already have one, here's where we are today. Here's where Yeah, I will. So the question was, can you tell us what's on that matrix? So on the y-axis, we have embedded versus centralized. And then on the x-axis, we have data as a product versus data as a service. So you can choose among those, right, where you want to land on that matrix. I told you I wouldn't rely on, here I am, relying on the slides. So data governance is a term you're going to hear. You may have already come across it. And it has always been so confusing to me, what is data governance? And I've heard a term data management, and some people say it's the same thing, and some people say it's not. To me, this is really simple. Who can see what, and who owns what? So if you have data coming from your billing system, and you don't want your whole company to see it, you only want certain groups to see it, you're doing data governance, right? Data governance is just be formal about it. Don't just assume that nobody's going to look at it if they shouldn't look at it. So who can see which pieces of data and who owns which pieces of data, right? So that those are usually different. How do you know that your revenue numbers are correct? Somebody in your company should be the authority on being able to tell you if that particular data set is correct or not. So somebody needs to own the data, and that's different from who can view the data. And then the last piece I put in here, this is my personal opinion, only because I see it so often and it causes so much pain. Don't repeat yourself. Don't let copies of your data float out all over the organization. Has anybody experienced this, or is this just my like pet peeve? You've got it? Can you tell me anything about it? Finances in spreadsheet and multiple copies spread out. Yeah. People change things to help themselves. Yeah. So it's not like you have version 1, version 2, version 3. It's like you have this person's version and that person's version, and they're all kind of going off in their own direction. This really happens, especially as you're getting into it. Spreadsheets don't go away. People are still going to use them, but this really happens. And so this, to me, if you're thinking about data governance, this is your third item. Find a way to stop making copies of spreadsheets, right?
I worked for a trades company, and everyone wanted to see like their schedule. They were archaic, they used Excel for people's schedules.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to a point where we had to like filter, and everyone had their own tab. It was still the same spreadsheet, but we had like thousands of tabs for each person per week, and it was madness. But like that's one of the things that if I do have to or like share sheets with people, I'll be like, okay, if you need to change something, if you need it shown a certain way, make do a I forget the term. But basically import the data.
Mm-hmm.
Same data, but you just filter it separately. And so you still have one point of authority, which as the owner I usually block. And like no one can change it, but you can have it viewed however you want on your separate tabs.
Fantastic. What's your name?
Sam.
Sam. Thank you, Sam. So Sam was saying she doesn't have multiple copies of spreadsheets. She has one spreadsheet and it had 1,000 tabs or however many tabs. Same problem. So she was saying she has a technique where she can have one copy of the data and people can import the data, not copy the data. Great. So you're governing your data. You're managing it well, right? So good example. So again, I don't want this to be things we have to pay attention to, right? And so there's simple ways to get to it. Any other questions or comments on data governance? Okay, we're done with people. People first. Promised, Pam. Okay, let's go into product. To me, this is the most interesting section. This is what really helps us be organized. As you get into it, if you go all in and you're trying to do analytics in your company, it's easy for things to proliferate and get lost. Of spreadsheets, and you're not quite sure what's real and what's fresh and what's right? So this has been, for us in our company, super helpful and allowed us to even work across a bunch of different customers and keep things straight without relying on the memory of what's what. It also helps us communicate really well. So the first concept I want to talk to you about is data assets. Has anybody heard that phrase, data is an asset? Got some? What does it mean? Okay, so Sam said it's important to your business. If you can't make it actionable, it's a liability. Go ahead, Mike.
It also could be a product that you can sell for revenue.
Great, okay. So there's value in data that you could potentially sell. Mike says you could sell your data as a product, okay? No, Pam, you're right on. Like Pam's saying, look, we've invested in this. We're expecting some kind of return out of it, right? We should do this well. We should get that return. Did you have one? I see a hand here. Oh, you got it. Yeah. Hashtag analytics OS. Any other is that confusing to anybody? Data is an asset? It's confusing to me because when I get into it, I'm like, well, it's not like it's paying me rent. Like, what is this asset? And if I just have a spreadsheet sitting on a shared drive somewhere, or if I have a database with a bunch of data in it, how is that helping me? So I've heard a lot of interpretations on this. Please go ahead. Yeah, something that provides unique value. See, y'all are so much better at this because I'm a technologist, and so I'm just looking at it as like cells and fields, and I'm not saying how it could actually be an asset like an office building where somebody's paying you rent. But I think actually you guys are teaching me and helping, y'all are helping me understand the term maybe as it has been for me. But what it has been helpful is to say, okay, let's go down another level. It's not an office building. How do we treat our data as an asset? So this is how it's helped us. First, there are data products, there are metrics, and there are data sources. And these are the three things that from a business perspective, we treat as assets. And how do we treat them as assets? Well, we name them, we inventory them, we understand their current level of quality, understand if we're going to be investing in them. So all the things you can think of you might do with an asset, these are what you do. So that means, thankfully, we don't have to go to every single data field or every single database or every single spreadsheet and make sure it's to the utmost quality. We have a list of actual assets that we're trying to manage and get value out of. Other pieces might be contributing to that, but just by starting with this list, you simplify the scope of what you're trying to do already, right? You can make this a very small list. If you're getting overwhelmed, and just say, you know what, we're going to start out with these 2 reports, and that's all we're going to treat as our starting asset list. And by the way, when I say data product, I'm talking dashboards, spreadsheets, like things that you identify that say this is something that people use, either customers or internal people. They're going to use this directly. Non-data people are going to try to get information out of this. That is a potential data product, right? Is that clear? Any questions on data products? What I mean by okay, great. Metric, it's named, it has a business definition, it's not just a technical concept, and it's a measurement that's important to you for making decisions. So somebody back here, the guy in the blue shirt, what's your name? Dave. So you mentioned earlier, you're trying to answer questions, right? That's a fundamental concept of data analytics. And a metric is a way to get you there, right? When you say, how much revenue do we have? Well, tracking revenue, and we're going to revenue a metric. How many sales did we have last month? Let's start counting sales. What's the average order value? Well, let's start calculating that. So we name that metric. We have a business definition that says, here's what that means. Here's how we calculate it. If we were to go into a spreadsheet, here's how we would do it. And that informs any implementer, if they're doing it in a spreadsheet or in a report or in a warehouse, that lets them know exactly what that metric is from a business perspective. And again, you list them. We fall into this trap at data tier. Almost everybody falls into this trap. You stop listing them. You just start implementing. I need a report that says this. I need something that says that. And then all of a sudden you're back into, you're not managing your assets. You have stuff that was put out there, but you don't know what level of quality it is. You're not paying attention to it. You don't know if it's correct or fresh. And then data sources, these are the behind the scenes things, but this is, where does your data live? If we're in a world of SaaS products, SaaS software products, and so our data is everywhere, right? Oh no, that's okay, we weren't using the slides anyway, right? Does that mean I've been on this slide too long? Yeah, okay, all right, I'll take a hint. So data sources is just where does your data live? If it comes from your CRM system, that's a data source. And you want to name those because what can happen is they can start to proliferate as well, or you can forget maybe one's erroring or one's shutting off and that pipeline's not working anymore, that data's not coming in. So treat it as an asset. Any comments on data assets?
So when you talk about data metrics, I think about benchmarking and what things that you see about benchmarking is using common definitions. So do you have like common definitions for common metrics? Lifetime value of a customer, what are some common ways of customer acquisition, things like that that we use and know the things that you're saying.
Great question. What's your name? Rashid, thank you for asking that. So Rashid's question, make sure I get it right. He says a very common use of metrics is benchmarking, but a problem with that is there's no common definition. What do you mean by customer lifetime value? Is our business different from a benchmark's definition? I think that's a huge problem in the industry right now. I don't think there's an answer for that. There are niche data products that you can buy a subscription to, and they can tell you like, here's all your finance metrics, right? And so if you agree with their definition, you could use that potentially to benchmark. There are industry groups that have kind of their definitions of these. There's some folks I follow that do SaaS financials, and they're really trying hard to figure out what are the SaaS metrics, but there's no answer right now for that. Thanks for that question. Mhm.
You don't know what business you're losing. They have a data set that tells you, oh, the product you sell the most is XYZ, but yet you could sell Y much more. So can you realize that you have a data gap when you have good benchmarking?
I like that phrase, data gap. Is it Raquel? Did I read that? Raquel. Thanks, Raquel. So she was saying if you're starting from the metric side, make sure I get this, Raquel. You might realize I don't actually have data sources that could inform the metric and produce that metric. Is that your point?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna table that and get back to this because we're gonna talk about a top-down and a bottoms-up process to follow here in just a moment. And I think it's gonna, because you're right, that's a real situation that happens. Brandon.
One of my big problems is our data sources don't agree on things, and it's little things like the CRM says we closed some new business. It didn't hit the accounting platform until the following month, or like revenue shows is booked in the main tool we use, but then didn't hit the bank until the following month. But we have like times we need numbers from both, and it's just created such a mess. But any thoughts on like prioritizing like which data source you're gonna trust over another, or how
Oh man,
make some
good question. So Brandon's saying his data doesn't always agree from his different systems. CRM booked a deal, but it's not in the billing system, or maybe it got canceled, or something happened along the way. How do you decide? So again, this is a problem with the world of SaaS that we live in, that none of these tools are connected, and essentially our business is a best of breed of all of these things that we're putting together. And I hate this phrase, but this is how we do it. And well, hopefully we'll get to this process piece in just a moment. But your analyst, whoever's in that role, needs to help decide, like, here's the best way we can answer this question. And at least we can be consistently wrong if we're wrong. If we're not perfect, maybe we're a little off. Maybe you go with the CRM and go with what it says, or maybe you go with your accounting system and maybe it's delayed and you don't have freshest information, but at least you're really consistent on how you're doing it. So then you can still do your trending, your averaging, all the things you might want to analyze. But then there may be more specific metrics. You can say, okay, there's a metric that I want to know that really and truly does come in the CRM system, but that's going to be a different metric. And then most of our metrics are going to let the accounting system trump over the CRM data. Probably not a great answer, but I think that's state of the art right now, honestly. So once you define your data assets, then there's this concept of context, and we'll get back to context when we get into the process. So when you think about context, we use it when we're working on something. When a customer says, this number doesn't look quite right, or we need a brand new dashboard, it helps if we set context with them. Who's the audience? What's the questions that they're asking? What metrics are in play here? What data products are we working on? What data sources, if any, are involved directly? And by setting that context, as your list of requests grow, you can very quickly jump back into the details of that one particular request. And then when it's done, you can go back to your customer stakeholder and say, here's what we were working on. Without this context, what we were finding is we would do something and maybe it took a week or two to actually finish this request. And we come back and they're going, I don't remember asking that. I don't think what you produced is exactly what I was looking at. And once we define, like, what are the questions we're trying to answer with this request, what metrics with their definitions are involved, once we got that level of clarity and say, do you remember this request? Oh yeah, I remember that request. Well, that's not quite what I wanted. Okay, well, here's the context. And we're all much more clear on what we're doing and why we're doing it and what the impact is that we're trying to make. So this is not complicated. This is just, like I said, those simple questions. Who's the audience? What the metrics? What are the data products? It's a huge difference in the delivery of our business, which is data as a service. Okay, on process. So I'm going to get back to context in just a moment, get to some of these questions about how we go about doing the work. But I wanted to talk about roadmap. And maybe you need this for yours, maybe you're kind of clear and you're running this effort yourself. But what we found is we get into the details of the work, and sometimes we forget, like, strategically, why are we doing this? Why are we bringing all this data together? And we got excited about these metrics and these questions, but does it align with the roadmap of the business? And are we actually doing analytics to directionally help the business? So again, this is a super simple list. It has a name and a priority, really, is all you really need. But it allows the data team to refer back to it and say, okay, CEO said this was the priority, so we should really be leaning into the requests and things that are on the roadmap. Hopefully not overly complicated, but just the act of doing it really helps us. Any comments here? This is a template. I talked about templates. A template that's a roadmap item can be a part of your context. When you're working on a request, is this related to any roadmap items that we're trying to deliver on? Okay, so when we do the work, overly heavy process stuff, project management tools that track every little tiny thing. So that's not what we're trying to do here. But I have also grown to appreciate, and Ben has taught me, like if we lose track of things, the customer cares, right? So how do we balance that? And again, this is, my opinions here are kind of feeding this. So I hate the heavy management, recognize there's some process. So 2 work tracks can go in parallel for whatever you're doing. Top down work and bottoms up. And so I want to show that here. So this, again, visuals a little, you don't need to memorize all this stuff. It's things we've already been talking about. On the top, audiences, subject areas, data products, things that are directly touching the business and people that are using the information. And then at the bottom, you have data sources, orchestration, the engineering type stuff. And what we found is if we work top to bottom and bottom to top at the same time, we waste very little effort. And here's what I mean. You have a CRM system. There is a lot of data. Do you need to pull all that data out of your ready to get ready to do analytics? And there's a common pattern that we see of saying, well, let's pull it out because we might need it, we might want it. And then they're just churning on the technical stuff, and they're just churning and pulling that in. If your top-down track is going on at the same time, and they're actively defining metrics, then it really informs the bottom-up track of which data do we really need right now? Which data should we be pulling together right now? And it saves a ton of time. And it keeps you from just spinning your wheels on pulling all the, because you might need it. Also, the bottoms-up track can inform the top-down. So you might get into the data, and as long as I've got an understanding as an engineer of what that metric is that I'm trying to pull together, I might go, we have a data gap. We can't produce this metric as defined. That's great to know early, right? Rather than define all your metrics and then try to go get them out of the data, that gives you a chance to go back to stakeholders and say, or evaluate yourself, how important is that metric? Is it worth digging in, finding a new data source? Could change the definition of that metric to kind of get us directionally where we need to be. So that's why the 2 tracks, top and bottom up, go at the same time. And then you meet in the middle around metrics definitions and the data model inside your warehouse. Comments or questions on that concept?
It's a little tangential, but do you find any techniques that are good for embedding that? Like if you're extracting data, say from the CRM system somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
attaching that context or metadata to the data itself, like so that, have you found anything that's effective for that so that you know that, hey, now that this data's in here, it says $5, but what it really is the price per unit, or something like, that's what I find is like the context get lost. Most really happen. Have you found anything effective for like including context or tagging context as you're moving?
Yeah, thank you for that. Is it Jesse or
Jasmine.
Jesvin, thank you. So the question was, have we found any techniques for actually attaching context to the data itself? Not quite, but there's some good steps towards that. There's some good documentation tools that you can attach information to any particular field. So it doesn't tie into the templates that I have, but you can say, look, this is related to this metric. That's just kind of free-form documentation, so it doesn't allow you to say, show me everything related to this metric or this data product. I think this concept you're getting to is referred to as data lineage in some ways. In some maybe there's some good overlap between data lineage and what you're asking about. And those products and vendors are trying to figure out how do we piece this together, not just context of what the data is, but where did it come from? What calculation did it go through to get here so we know we can trust it? And so there are some, there's a lot of companies starting up trying to give context and lineage to the data. Concepts on the basics of data tagging. Yeah. So the question was, do we have any guidance on data tagging and more about context? And I don't. What we found, and we serve SMB type customers, not large enterprises. So maybe this wouldn't work in an enterprise. But what we found is if we can get our data assets inventoried and have those listed, then just starting to work through on what we're doing and when we can tag context to the requests, the work that we're doing. But we don't have a method for tagging context to all the data points. Okay, I think let's end on this slide. There's a few more things. There's a whole platform concept of how do you pick the right tools and what's the architecture pattern. Let's table that for now. This is all going to be available to you if you want it. But what I'd like to end on is just what's the collaboration? Whatever your data team, however they're structured, what meetings should we have? What should we be talking about? How do you manage this work? There's not a lot of meetings that you have to have. There's the ad hoc work that goes on, and it happens in all of our companies, so I'm not counting that work. But at the top level, there's a monthly or a quarterly business review. Some people have steering committees. I've heard of steering committees before. To me, I like this to be a more dynamic group. But here's where we start off with the roadmap. How many requests did we deliver against the roadmap? How many requests did we deliver at all? How many data products are in our inventory? Those kinds of questions, just to make sure we're aligned. Does the roadmap need to be updated? So this is a touch point with the data team that they understand they're still working in the right direction strategically with the business. The second listed here is what we call a rapid meeting. So we took this, there's a concept called RAID meetings where you go over, it's like project management, risks, assumptions, issues, decisions. It's just a template to follow for your meetings and project management. What we've done is we don't tend to do lots of big projects. Ours is more ongoing work. We've taken this concept and we've added a P, which is priorities. So what requests have we recently completed? What requests are we working on now? What requests are next in our queue? And that's the P for priorities. We do it on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis, and that gives the people a level down from the strategy work and ability to weigh in and say, oh, let's not do that request yet. Let's change the priority of this. So just by doing this, it keeps the data team aligned without having to suck in time from across the business, because the data team's working with every department, and all of these people have day jobs. They're not on the data team. So this touch point, this weekly rapid meeting, has helped us stay aligned, make sure we're working on the same thing, and it's a good cadence to do either weekly, once weekly, or once every other week. And then the last concept are workshops. And these are focused, structured sessions where you cover a specific topic. So we have data workshops. This is not a technical workshop. This is analyst-led, and they're really the business and the data and the domain that they're working in, the questions that they're working in. We have tech workshops, which is bottoms up. This is the engineers trying to figure out, can I get the password to the CRM system? Can we just get in a room and get this login happening, right? That's the kind of stuff they're covering in a tech workshop. And just by meeting on it, you get out of Slack and email and you just make it happen. And then the last one is the design workshop. So way back to the beginning on this question of how do you visually represent, are good patterns for visually representing data and being able to answer questions. But sometimes they don't always work, and sometimes you want it represented a certain way. This is a great chance for a workshop with somebody who's focused in on how do I communicate the answers to the audience that needs them. Are we going to use a dashboard? Are we going to use an Excel document? And if so, what do they need to see? How are we going to represent this information? So with these 3 workshops, we found it pulls the right people in the room at the right time to do the right things, and they're very effective for just keeping that momentum going. I'm going to pause here. I think we're 50 minutes in. You've been great. Very few people have left. I promised I'd give you a freebie, these templates for free. We didn't have a chance to get into the templates a lot. Not complicated. It's a spreadsheet with a handful of tabs to help you take your inventory of your assets, keep up with your inventory, to help you take your requests and associate context to all those requests and prioritize things. And that's how we use it. Again, it's not a heavy-handed process thing, and I would love your feedback on it. And you start to use it. We've worked with probably close to 20 customers ourselves. I've interviewed about 100 people on what are their best practices for doing analytics in their company. That's what this is, but that's still a very small data set, right? So any information you can provide back to me, would love it. So let me get to the ending closing slide, and then I'll open up for any last questions. All right, and if you can't see it, back there. I'll leave it up. But the templates are available on Gumroad. The discount code is DSW for Denver Startup Week. And you can search for Analytics Operating System to get those templates. Thank you so much.